Hey everyone, one thing that I love the most about fly fishing is that there's always more that you can learn. And surrounding yourself with people who are better than you are is one of the best ways to level up your game. In January of 2026, I went to the Virginia Fly Fishing Show where I met a bunch of people that fit this description. These are people that have been in the game for a long time, like Corey Kuju, Tom Rosenbauer, and Josh Miller. Josh is the coach of the Team USA Youth Fly Fishing Team that has won the last 3 consecutive World Fly Fishing Youth Championships. Now Josh's book, as well as a presentation that I attended at the Fly Fishing Show, were both filled with cutting-edge techniques that his team of incredible youth anglers are using to just dominate at the world level. In February of 2024, I had the chance to fish against 2 of Josh's young proteges in a fly fishing competition with my buddy Seth Underwood. We fished well and caught a lot of fish, but Blake Hall and Justin Hardy absolutely smoked us on their way to winning the competition outright. After the session was over, we talked to Blake and Justin about the techniques that they were using to catch so many fish. And one of the things that they mentioned was that they were fishing a dry dropper technique known as fishing the Y. They learned this technique from Josh Miller, their coach, and had also used it during the World Fly Fishing Championships the year before. By the end of the video today, I'm going to have shared with you all of the tips and techniques that I have learned that have taken this technique from a little bit effective to wildly effective.
There's another one. So what I'm learning is this is a short range, certain water types method. So I just like pick one out of here, pick one out of here, just like barely out the end of my rod tip.
Fishing the Y is a very complicated and technical technique. So throughout the video today, I'm going to be cutting back and forth to my recording studio where I'm going to use this piece of rope to demonstrate exactly what's going on and how to make this fishing the Y technique successful. I can't emphasize enough that this fishing the Y dry dropper technique is a short range tactic. When I had the best success was when I literally had 8 feet of leader and my tippet out the end of my rod tip. It was super close to me. 10 feet was good, 12 feet was good, 15 feet I could still control it pretty well. But once I started to get out to like 20, 25 feet, everything got sloppy. I couldn't keep my Y angle right, it was going all over the place, I wasn't getting good contact, I couldn't see my knot as well. You gotta keep it close to you for it to be effective. Fishing the Y is a tight line dry dropper technique that's made to use with a micro leader. It's not gonna work with a fly line and a tapered leader. In my hands I have some 4X Adams mono. This is what I typically use for my micro leader, but there's lots of other things that will work as well.
Okay, we're gonna fish some of this flatter stuff with the dry dropper. The wind's really blowing. It's gonna be tough to get a good drift in here just with some nymphs, but I'm hoping if I get my dry dropper going, that'll keep it anchored in that water, keep me up off the ground, and with any luck, stick a few. What I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to try to fish the Y. So I'm going to get my dry fly on the water. I'm going to be looking at this knot junction. My size 18 pheasant tail is going to be down in the water.
It's important to understand that the rope just represents the tippet section, starting with the tippet ring and coming down through this part right here. This would be connected onto a micro leader that would be going to your rod and your reel up on this end. Now this part you're going to set up essentially the same as a double nymph rig. I like to use a figure 8 for this dropper tag knot right here. It's the strongest and the most reliable knot that I found. And then you're going to keep coming down here to what would be your point fly. For this example, the piece of marabou that's on the end of the tag is going to serve as the dry fly, and this big heavy carabiner is going to serve as the point fly that would be under the water. One thing in this setup that's absolutely critical is that the length of this tag section needs to be between 4 and 6 inches. If it's too short, let's say it's only 2 inches, there's not enough distance here to get the Y angle that you need and be able to see it. And if it's too long, let's say you made it a foot long, it's flopping around all over the place, it's super hard to get control, and you can't get a steady drift because this knot is moving all over the place when you're trying to watch it. Now, if you get excited to learn new techniques like this that help you catch a lot of fish, subscribe to the channel, because the whole goal of me doing this is to pass along all the information that I'm learning to you so that you can have more success on the water as well.
So what I'm doing now is I'm just putting some Skafker's neon wax on the junction of the Y. That's going to help me to be able to see it a little bit better. Here, I'm going to pull it apart. I should be able to see that Y junction, keep my dry fly on the surface, get my nymph underneath, and hopefully pull a couple out of this flatter stuff.
The biggest reason to fish the Y dry dropper technique over a more traditional dry dropper technique is because it's far more sensitive and it's quicker to register the takes.
So I'm just trying to land with my nymph first, hold my dry fly up like this, just let it drift down through here.
When you cast this thing, you want your nymph to enter the water first. You don't want everything to land all together. So what I like to do is I like to cast and stop it high, just like I would almost for a tuck cast, just a shorter version of it. And when you stop it high like that, it's going to shoot this nymph down, the nymph's going to enter the water, and then you literally just drop it down until the dry fly gets on the surface. That's the easiest and the most predictable way to get your Y angle right and to do it quickly.
All right, this should be a good spot to... There's one, right there. Yep, my dry fly just went under. Fishing the Y on the nymph. Thanks, buddy. So it ate the pheasant tail.
The type of dry fly that we pick for this technique is very important. We generally don't want to use big foam bugs for this. Those are going to cast better on a weight forward line with the tapered leader. But the types of bugs we're trying to use with this are either a hatch matcher. In this case, this is a Josh Miller Clueless Caddis. It's made to match the hatch, but also to have a lot of floating power. And the other type of fly that we can use for this is just a pure floater fly. This is called the Popsicle Fly by Josh Miller. This popsicle fly was designed almost solely to float as much weight as possible. In fact, I can suspend a 3.8 millimeter bead on this, and in calm water, even a 4.0 millimeter bead on this popsicle floater pattern. One thing to keep in mind when you're fishing the Y is that you want the floatability of your dry fly along with the weight of your nymph to be balanced. In other words, if you have a super floaty dry fly like this popsicle fly and a really lightweight nymph like a zebra midge, it's going to take a lot to get this big dry fly to go under when it takes that little tiny bug, as opposed to if you have something heavier underneath of it, it's more sensitive because those flies are balanced better. I wanted to use this demonstration rope in order to show you what the takes look like when you're fishing the Y dry dropper, because it looks a little bit different than both tight line nymphing or fishing a more traditional dry dropper. If you catch a fish on the dry, you're probably going to see it because it's going to come up, eat the dry, and go back down. It's going to be pretty obvious. Now, if a fish is sitting in the current and it eats your nymph, you're going to see either one of two things happen. If it eats your nymph and it just goes down, the dry fly is going to go under the water just like you would see in a regular dry dropper scenario. Or if the fish goes upstream, you're going to see the main line tippet tighten and the tag is going to bounce back upstream towards that piece of tippet like this. When you see that bounce and the fly goes up towards the tippet, set the hook, and remember, we're always setting the hook in the downstream direction, so we're pulling the fly into the fish's mouth and not back out.
I don't know if you can see, but my dry fly was floating really well, and then all of a sudden took a quick dip. Now the fish didn't eat the dry fly, but it served as my indicator. Again, I'm watching that junction. I'm not really even watching the dry fly necessarily. It's in my eye, but that junction of that Y is what I'm really looking at. Oh, there was a big one. All right, well, maybe we can still get him to eat. We're gonna rest him a little bit. He ate right down here at the end of this pocket. He must have followed it, or else he's sitting at the tail out, I don't know. I got all this nice little flat stuff. You can nymph this, but with this wind like it's doing, it's just not super easy to do. So fishing the Y like I'm doing is letting me get good drifts, giving me a chance at these fish that otherwise would be kind of difficult. That orange really makes my Y junctions stand out better.
This is what it looks like after you put some of the orange Skafker's wax on this junction knot, as well as a few inches above and below all the sections of the Y. I did this with the Sharpie, and you might be thinking, oh, I could just use a paint marker like I'd use to put a cider on my leader to do this. The problem with that is that one of the beauties of this technique is that if you get done fishing a dry dropper and you want to go back to nymphing again, all you do is cut the dry fly off, you put another nymph on the tag, and you can just scrape that wax right off and keep on fishing, nymphing just like you were before. If you use a paint marker, you're going to have a problem because all of this orange that you put on here is now more permanent and it's not going to scrape off if you want to go back to nymphing. You're going to have to retie your whole tippet rig if you do that.
I really want the dry fly to be downstream of my nymph, ideally. It's not always possible.
Another thing that's crucial to understand is that you want your dry fly to be downstream of your nymph. When you cast it, it might land like this, and you have to let it rotate to the downstream position before you're going to have any strike detection. Ideally, that will happen quickly, but sometimes you have to help it a little bit by kind of lifting your rod tip so that it can rotate on this side. Once you get it on this side, then you want it to just stay downstream as much as possible. As your whole rig starts moving downstream, keep your dry fly downstream of everything else. Now imagine that this hand is the surface of the water and the dry fly is sitting on the surface of the water. The nymph is down below the water. You can vary this angle of the Y. You can make a wider angle if you like, or you can make a smaller angle if you like. It works either way, and in certain circumstances, you might prefer one over the other.
Just missed another one. Getting lots of eats. Not too many sticking right now. All right, we're gonna try something here. I'm gonna lengthen this a little bit. So I just added a piece of tippet. This is probably 3 feet deep out here. So I'm gonna be running my dropper about another foot to 18 inches deeper than I was. Hopefully that'll get me down a little bit better in this deep stuff, and the fish that eat will stick.
Now this section that goes down to your point fly, the length of this is going to vary based on the depth of the water. I will say this, in general, this section needs to be longer than you think that it does, and here's why. When you're fishing a standard dry dropper and this is sitting on the surface of the water, you have all of the 6 inches of the tag plus all of the length here to get your point fly down to the bottom. But when you fish the Y, you're going to have this whole part out of the water like this. The dry fly sits on the surface of the water, and then you have that Y angle right here that's going to be out of the water. So you're losing 6 to 8 inches of what depth you think you have to get down to the bottom. So make this piece longer than you think you probably need it.
There he is. Ha-ha! Yes. Thanks, buddy. It can be tricky not to actually watch your dry fly. My tendency is to want to watch my dry fly, but you really want to keep that junction out of the water and watch the junction. All right, I've got a BWO soft tackle on now. Still fishing the Y dry dropper. Okay. Let's fish the Y some more. There's another one. Look at that, you guys. That's amazing. Starting to get it now. So that fish literally ate right there. Came out of that little chute. I was able to get my bugs in there, keep my drift going. I saw my dry fly go. There it was. So now we're gonna try the same thing here in this stuff right here. drift this shallow stuff right here. This would be a pain in the butt to nymph.
I fished this technique a lot, and I've had the best success by far in shallow to medium depth of water. This isn't a tactic that I would use in a really deep pool very often.
There's another one. Thanks, buddy.
If you watch Josh Miller fish this tactic, he hardly ever fishes more than 15 feet of leader and tippet out of the end of his rod tip. Everything is short, it's controlled, it's precise, it's surgical.
Also, what I'm learning too is I don't want to have to manage any slack. I'm just holding a fixed length of line. That lets me control it better. Oh, there was another one. If I have to manage slack, things get wonky. But if I just hold it steady, that's why Josh Miller fishes so close, because you can't do this from long distance, and have any kind of control. It's got to be close to you to be able to control this. So I can like regular nymph fish out of these too, but with these active fish and this wind, it's really helping me still get good drifts.
I've had the best success with this technique when the water temperatures have been warmer. Somewhere in that 50 to 60 degree range is optimal for this. That's going to be where the fish are going to be more aggressively moving to take flies. They'll come up off the bottom more. They might even suspend mid-column. It's much easier to get them to move to eat a fly when the water temperature is in that active range, as opposed to when it's really cold and they're down hugging the bottom.
I do think this is a better warm water tactic than cold, because I think I'm above a lot of these fish. In other words, if fish are sitting down low, I think I'm going to be over them.
Now, when listening to Josh Miller talk about this technique, he said that the goal is to have the dry fly and the nymph both above the sight line of the fish, so that the fish, when it sees the fly, will come up, take the fly, and then go back down. And when it goes back down, that's going to register more drastic of a strike than if it just eats it as it's coming to it at its same level.
I don't think I'm getting down necessarily, but in these like shallow little riffraffs, I don't really need to get down. There's one. Whoa! Haha! So that's a fish I would have never caught fishing a regular dry dropper. Okay, we're sitting somewhere around 10 caught fishing the Y. I'm gonna fish this little section here, the next little section above this flat, see if we can't get a couple more. I'm starting to really figure it out.
Thank you for watching this brook to river fly fishing tutorial about how to fish the Y dry dropper technique. If you commit to learning this and you use it correctly in the right scenarios, it's absolutely going to put more fish in your net from some spots where you typically wouldn't catch a lot of fish. And as always, now that you've seen me catch a bunch of fish fishing the Y technique, you go catch a bunch of fish fishing the Y technique, and when you do, send some pictures or some videos my way. See you next time. Bye.